Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So I've been talking a lot about contracts during this offseason the last week or so. I just gave you my updated top 10 best and top 10 worst contracts in the NHL. So I kind of wanted to put maybe a little bit of a bow on some of this contract talk and just give you the worst and best contract on every single team in the NHL, all 32. We're going to rip through this. I'm not going to spend like a minute or two on every single team or else we'd have a video north of 30 minutes. So without further ado, let's get into it. When talking about this, of course, it's going to be based on how much term they have left, what's their AAV, how old they are, what is their level of skill right now. No ELCs with this, because obviously for like a Chicago, Connor Bedard, the next 2 years at what, 950K is without a doubt their best contract. But I'm doing no ELCs. It's going to have to be deals that were signed after your ELC. So let's get into it. Up first, I'm going to do Chicago, and I think for their best contract, there's not a ton of long-term contracts on this team, but I think Alex Vlasic's 6-year deal at $4.6 million has a lot of potential to age into one of the better defenseman contracts over the next 6 seasons. Vlasic played around 22 minutes a night last season and put up very solid defensive results on a pretty bad Chicago Blackhawks team. Do I think he's ever going to have the offensive ceiling to go for like 45 points in a season? No, but if he's a 30 to 35 point guy while also being very good defensively, considering he's only 22 years old, you get him throughout most of his prime years. This could be a very good deal for the Chicago Blackhawks. And in terms of worst, it's easily Seth Jones, 6 years left at $9.5 million. Still an okay player. Like, he's not the worst defenseman in the world. He gets a little bit overhated because of his contract, but at $9.5 million for him, not even to be close to like a top 25 defenseman in the NHL. It was my third worst contract in the entire NHL, so it's definitely Chicago's worst overall contract. Next up, my New York Islanders, going to rip through it. I think the Anthony Duclair contract, 4 years, $3.5 million, is honestly the best contract on the books. I know that they signed it this summer, but when looking at it, a 28-year-old that had 24 goals and 42 points. Most of that he was playing on the god-awful San Jose Sharks in 73 games. I think he's going to really fit into that top 6, probably on that top line, and give the Islanders like 25 and 25 and has legit 30 and 30 potential over the next 4 years. I think he's going to be a $5 to $6 million player. So the fact that we got him at only $3.5 million, I thought was fantastic work for Lamoriello. And in terms of the worst contract, it's Scott Mayfield, 6 years left at 3.5. You can maybe go with Pierre Engvall, but with the way that Mayfield got hurt towards the end of the season and just his overall play, Stadium Series game, it's brutal. Next up for the Edmonton Oilers, there's a lot of potential contracts to choose from. You could go with obviously Draisaitl 1 year at $8.5 million. There's only 1 year left though. Same with Bouchard at 3.9. McDavid 2 years, 12.5 is a steal. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has 5 years left at 5.125, but I'm going to go with Zach Hyman when looking at him. 4 years left at 5.5. This guy had 54 goals during the regular season and then led the NHL in playoff goals, 70 goals total on the season. Definitely benefits from playing with Connor McDavid, but he's a legit $8 to $9 million guy, probably the next 2 years. And even if he does regress into his mid-30s, 5.5 is nothing for a guy that has been as productive as he has been the last 2 years. And in terms of their worst contract, similarly to Seth Jones, it's Darnell Nurse. It is Darnell Nurse without a doubt. 6 years left at 9.25. Okay, second pair guy if he had a decent partner, but at $9.25 million, that's a disaster. Next up, the team that they lost to in the Stanley Cup final, the Florida Panthers. You could make an argument for Gustav Forsling. His new 8-year deal is a great deal for the Florida Panthers. I'm going to go with Matthew Tkachuk, the more proven commodity at 6 years, 9.5, 109 points the year prior, carried them offensively to the Stanley Cup final. And then this season, another around 90-ish point season, as well as being great in the playoffs. In terms of their worst contracts, their books are pretty good. I'm not going to lie. You can maybe go with Bobrovsky, 2 years at $10 million, but he was a Vezina finalist last year on top of being very good in the playoffs. So I'm going to go with Aaron Ekblad, 1 year at 7.5. He's still a good top pair defenseman. He's probably like a $6 to $6.5 million guy, but he's not able to stay healthy. On top of the offensive production, really wasn't that impressive this year. 18 points in 51 games. It's, again, 1 year at 7.5. It's not a bad deal by any stretch. You just got to choose someone when you're making lists like this. The Anaheim Ducks, Troy Terry has 6 years left at $7 million. I'm going to go with that deal. Bit of a down season this year, 54 points in 76 games, but this is a guy that had 67 and 75 in his first real breakout season. Then he had 61 and 70. I think he's going to get back to being around the 65 to 70 point guy. He's only 27 years old. This deal is going to take him throughout his entire prime. At only $7 million, that's going to be good liner money in no time. It's already low end first liner money, and I think that he is a very good first liner. And in terms of their worst deal, I'm going to go with Ryan Strome. 3 years left at $5 million. Has posted back-to-back 41-point seasons, but is absolutely atrocious defensively. So as a result, I got to put him at the worst. The Vegas Golden Knights, William Karlsson is making $5.9 million the next 3 seasons. I made a video yesterday talking about how underrated I think he is. 30 goals, 30 assists, 60 points in 70 games while giving you Selke level defense. He is a legit $7.5 to $8 million player, one of the best two second line centers in the NHL. And in terms of their worst, again, I still think the overall value of the deal, it was well worth it. But Pietrangelo at $8.8 million the next 3 years. I think that probably for most of that contract, he's going to be the number 3 defenseman behind Shea Theodore and Noah Hannafin at this point. Still a good player, but 8.8 is a lot to pay. And considering he's 33, 34 years old, I don't love the deal right now for the Vegas Golden Knights. Columbus, Boone Jenner, 2 years left at $3.75 million. A fantastic contract. If he wasn't captain, I would maybe look into trading him if I was Columbus. He's put up 55-point pace, as well as being very solid defensively the last 3 seasons. So again, $3.75 million for that, who's basically been their number 1 center. I know that they've been shit throughout that, but he has been very good. And in terms of their worst contract, you got to go with Johnny Gaudreau, 5 years left, $9.75 million, 74 points his first season, all the way down to 60. He's 31 years old, 5 years left at serious first liner money. Not looking good for the Columbus Blue Jackets in terms of the Johnny Gaudreau signing. Utah Hockey Club, the best is pretty easily Clayton Keller at 4 years left, $7.15 million. This is a guy that has been point per game the last 2 years, last 3 seasons, I think, even while not having the most talent around him. Nick Schmaltz is a decent player, but he's had like Barrett Hayden centering him at times. So when looking at Keller, he's $9 to $9.5 million player, arguably the next 4 seasons, still only 26 years old. One of the best, almost made my top 10 best in the entire NHL. And in terms of worst, they have a very good salary cap structure. So I had to pick, you have to pick one here. So I ended up going with Mikhail Sergachev at 7 years at $8.5 million. I'll see within the first 10 games of the season, I'll probably know, oh, Mikhail Sergachev is fully back. But still coming off that massive leg break, he didn't play a ton for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Even in those playoff games, I think he only played like 17 to 18 minutes a night. So when looking at him, it's risky. I respect them going out and trying to get a Sergachev, but there's a chance that he's just not the same player after breaking that leg. And yeah, it's risky. I don't think it's a horrible deal, but right now I think it would be their worst. It has the potential for sure to be their worst deal out of anybody. The Seattle Kraken, they have Jared McCann locked up for the next 3 seasons at only $5 million. This guy had 40 goals, 30 assists for 70 points back in 2023. This season, still 29 goals, 33 assists for 62 points. He's basically 30 and 30. To get that at $5 million, that's probably a $6.5 to $7 million guy. And considering the fact he's still in his prime, he's only 28 years old. Great deal for the Seattle Kraken. And in terms of their worst, Chandler Stevenson, 7 years, $6.25 million. Only 51 points this year at age 30, and they decided to hand him this massive 7-year bag. It's absolute crap. Dallas Stars, Miro Heiskanen, 5 years, $8.45 million, my 3rd best contract in the entire NHL. So he's clearly going to be Dallas. It's funny, Dallas has like a bunch of good deals. They have Robertson at 2 years left, like 7.75. Hintz is locked up, but their worst deals, Tyler Seguin, 3 years at $9.85 million. On top of Jamie Benn has 1 year left at 9.5. But Tyler Seguin, 9.85 for a good second liner at this point is a pretty big disaster. Thank God that they do have some of their young guys locked up long-term at very good prices. The Detroit Red Wings, Dylan Larkins, 8-year, $8.7 million deal, 1 year in. Looks very good. 7 years left. This is a guy that has been around point per game, around 35 goal, 45 assist pace the last 3 seasons. He's worth around 9.5. I'd have him as a top 13 to 17 center in the NHL. So he is well worth his contract and only 28 years old. The deal is going to age very good. In terms of their worst, you could go with Ben Sherratt, who has 2 years left at 4.75. But I think I'm going to go with Ville Husso, who only has 1 year left at 4.75. Just because heading into this season, I think they obviously brought in Cam Talbot. He's going to be at the NHL level. Alex Lyon was very solid for them last year. So I think Ville Husso is like not even going to be playing games for them. And when looking at him, he had an 896 in 2023, 892 last year. So they're just basically burning $4.75 million. Sherratt can at least play serious games, log decent minutes, and he's going to have to within that defense core. He can maybe turn it around and be a $3 to $3.5 million defenseman, but Husso is looking like he's just getting like Jack Campbell straight bench next season. It's going to be another disaster in terms of the Ville Husso experience for Steve Yzerman. Next up, the St. Louis Blues. Robert Thomas has 7 years left at $8.125 million, set a career high in goals and points this season, while also being very good defensively, amazing passer. And in terms of worst, you can maybe go with Parayko, who has 6 years left at 6.5, but I still think Colton Parayko is a good defensive defenseman. So I went with Torrey Krug at 3 years, 6.5 for a guy that gives you around 35, 40 points while being pretty dog shit defensively and is like 32 years old. It's not looking good for the St. Louis Blues with that deal. Boston Bruins, David Pastrnak is the best deal on this. Brad Marchand only has 1 year left at $6.1 million. So it's got to be Pasta here. 7 years left at $11.25 million. Back-to-back 110-point seasons. Amazing deal for the Boston Bruins. It's good that they locked him up when they locked him up. And when looking at the worst, you could go with Lindholm, but I think Lindholm has a chance to bounce back to be a 7-ish guy. The Zadorov deal, though, 6 years for a guy that's 29 years old, big physical, $5 million. I don't see this deal being positive value. Maybe he can be a $5 million player the next 2 seasons, but I think this deal could go south very, very quick. So I'm going to go with this. I think Lindholm does have the capability to turn into a 70, 75-point guy with David Pastrnak. Zadorov, best case, he's a good second-pair defenseman. For the Pittsburgh Penguins, Sidney Crosby, 1 year left, 8.7. You can maybe go with Evgeny Malkin, 2 years at 6.1, but I'm going to go with Crosby, a legit $12.5, $13 million player if he's fully healthy next season. And in terms of their worst, I hated the deal at the time. People thought I was crazy. I watched a lot of New Jersey Devils hockey in 2023. So when Ryan Graves got a 6-year deal at $4.5 million, now there's only 5 years left. He was brutal this season for the Pittsburgh Penguins. You saw in the last video, maybe I'll flash it again, how the difference between Marcus Pettersson with Letang and Carlson versus Graves with them is like night or day. He really synced that top 4 this season. It was not good. So even though it's $4.5 million, the fact that he has 5 years left on it, not a good signing by Kyle Dubas. The LA Kings, Quinton Byfield, this recent extension is great. 5 years, $6.25 million for a guy that had 55 points last year and is probably going to be worth north of $6.25 million next season at only 22 years old. This has the potential to turn into one of the best contracts in the NHL. And in terms of worst, it's another one that Rob Blake signed this offseason. It's Joel Edmondson, 4 years, $3.85 million. A bottom pair physical defenseman getting that much term at 31 years old is just ridiculous, and I hate it. Philadelphia Flyers, Joel Farabee has 4 years left at only $5 million. This guy had a solid 22-goal, 28-assist season for 50 points. I think he's going to continue to be a very, very good second liner. Maybe never going to be 65-plus points, but it's at $5 million. That's like low-end second liner, high-end third liner money at this point. So considering the fact that he's only 24 years old, really coming into his prime, it's a great deal for them. And then unfortunately, the worst deal for Philly, it has to be Sean Couturier, 6 years left, $7.75 million. Still decent defensively, but offensively only got them 38 points in 74 games. The price tag is just far too much after those injuries that happened. The San Jose Sharks, Mikael Granlund has 1 year left at $6 million. When looking at him, he had 60 points in 69 games this season. Was really an offensive spark plug to that team. And in terms of their worst deal, he's a legend. He might honestly get his jersey retired one day, but Vlasic, 2 years left at $7 million is basically burning money. The Colorado Avalanche, Cale Makar, 3 years, $9 million left. Best defenseman in the NHL. He's like the 8th or 9th highest paid defenseman next season. That's only going to go down once other guys get massive deals. And in terms of their worst contract, it's not the end of the world. Miles Wood is only making $2.5 million for the next 5 seasons. It's just far too much term to give a bottom sixer. Right now, like the next 2 years, it'll probably be fine. He'll be worth 2.5, but yeah, 5 years for a 28, 29-year-old, I don't really like that much. Tampa Bay Lightning, Brandon Hagel. I went with Brandon Hagel for the best. You could go with Kucherov, 3 years, 9.5. You could go with Braden Point, 3 years, 9.5. I went with Hagel. Just signed it, 8 years, $6.5 million. And when looking at this, a 25-year-old that gives you around 70-ish points, he's a $7.5 to $8.5 million player, and the cap is only going up, and he's going to maintain being in his prime. It's basically going to cover his prime until he's 32, 33 years old. So I absolutely love that deal. And in terms of the worst, Connor Sheary signed for the next 2 years at $2 million, 15 points in 57 games. He's not some defensive wizard. You could have got him. You could have got a replacement for him basically at like a league minimum. And the fact you're paying him the next 2 years at $2 million is just burning $1.2 million. The New Jersey Devils, Jack Hughes, pretty easily their best contract, 6 years, $8 million. In terms of the worst, it's got to be Andre Palat. In his first 2 seasons with the New Jersey Devils, he has put up 37-point pace. Not good for them. 3 years, he's 31 or 32 years old. That's like the one clear Tom Fitzgerald miss as of right now. Nashville Predators, Roman Josi has 4 years left at $9.06 million. You go with Forsberg, who has 6 years left at 8.5. I'm going to go with Josi, who is still a top 5 defenseman in the NHL. He's getting up there in age. Maybe the last year of this deal or 2 years maybe won't be supreme value, but I think based on what we're seeing, he's playing his best hockey right now between the ages of like 31 through 40 or 31 through 34. So I think he's still going to be good for the next 4 years and be worth $9.06 million. On the flip side of that, the worst one is the defenseman that they just signed, Brady Shea, 7 years, $7 million for a guy that is not as proven as usual guys that get $7 million, on top of the fact that he's 30 years old, I believe. And yeah, it's not going to age well, but Nashville is just going for it for the next 2 to 3 years. So who really cares? The Montreal Canadiens, Nick Suzuki has 6 years left at $7.875 million. This guy put up Selke level defense on top of 33 goals, 44 assists this season. He was great. He was worth $9.5 million. And again, he's still only 25 years old. You're getting his entire prime during this, and he's going to be well worth it every single season. And in terms of worst, you could go with Brandon Gallagher, 3 years, 6.5. I'm personally going to go with Josh Anderson, 3 years, 5.5, 20 points last year. Brutal defensively. Not looking good for Josh Anderson. The New York Rangers, Adam Fox, 5 years, $9.5 million. I think he's genuinely worth $11.5, $12 million. I think he is that good. I think he's the second best defenseman, if not at the worst case scenario, the third behind Quinn Hughes. So when looking at him at 9.5 with that term, great deal by them. And then in terms of their worst, Jacob Trouba, 2 years left at $8 million for a guy that was a total liability come playoff time and is probably a $2.5 to $3.5 million defenseman. I think he's turned that bad on the New York Rangers. The Buffalo Sabres, Tage Thompson has 6 years left at $7.14 million. Had a bit of a down year, but still was probably worth $7.14 million. He had 57 points in 71 games. He's going to bounce back. He's going to get back to at least point per game and be well worth that. He's only 26 years old. In terms of worst, there weren't a ton of options here for the Buffalo Sabres. So I went with Connor Clifton, 2 years left at $3.33 million. The underlying numbers weren't that impressive for him, on top of the fact that he was only playing 16.33 a night on not that good of a defense score with Buffalo Sabres. Not like he was previously on the Boston Bruins and he didn't play a lot there, but that at least made sense. Even in Buffalo, he has not really made a name for himself or really impacted at a high level. The Vancouver Canucks, Quinn Hughes, 3 years, $7.85 million, top 10 contract in the NHL. Norris level guy. The next 3 years, similarly to Adam Fox, worth $11 to $12 million. Great deal. You could maybe go with the JT Miller one as well, only making $8 million for the next 6 or 7 seasons. But JT Miller is a little bit older. There might be some regression at the end of that. I know what I'm getting from Quinn Hughes. And in terms of their worst one, again, like the Sabres, like some other teams that I talked about before, I don't think that this is a horrible deal, bad deal. I think it's a perfectly okay deal. But out of the ones that I had to choose that had like some term left, I went with Philip Hronek, 8 years at $7.25 million. I think he's a okay top pairing guy, and that's probably worth $6.5 to $7 million. You were going to have to overpay for him considering the first half of the season that he had. It's okay, but I still don't love it for the Vancouver Canucks. The Calgary Flames, you could go with the Uyghur deal that has 7 years left at $6.25 million, but he is getting up there in age. He's already 30 or 31 years old. So I ended up going with Rasmus Anderson, good top pair guy, probably a top 40, top 35 defenseman in hockey for me, only making $4.55 million the next 2 seasons. Worst, let's not waste any time. It's Jonathan Huberdeau, 7 years, $10.5 million. Minnesota Wild, Matt Boldy, he was in my top 10, 6 years, $7 million. I think this guy's floor, we've already seen it, is like 35 goals, 35 assists, while also being great defensively, well worth $7 million. And their worst deal is the one that they signed this offseason, Jakub Trenin, 4 years, $3.5 million. Not some defensive specialist, doesn't offer much offensively, 17 points in 76 games last year, and has never broke the 25-point mark in his entire career. For the Winnipeg Jets, I have Josh Morrissey as their best contract. 4 years left at $6.25 million. Around the 70-ish point defenseman, making low-end number 2, high-end number 3 money. In terms of worst, the Mark Scheifele deal, 7 years left at $8.5 million for a guy that's entering his 30s. There's just far too much term on that. And even right now, he's like maybe an $8.5 million player. He's definitely not worth north of $9 million. So that deal is probably going to age like absolute crap. The Toronto Maple Leafs, Austin Matthews, 4 years at $3.25 million. Highest paid player in the entire NHL, but he is well worth that considering he should be getting probably like $14, $15 million when he's healthy and can give you 60 plus goals every single season as well as Selke level defense. And then worst, I could have went with the OEL or Chris Tanev ones, but I think we agree that those deals are going to be thrown on LTIR like once they start stinking it up. So I ended up just going with the John Tavares, 1 year left at $11 million for a mid-60s, not that good defensively center. He's probably a 6.5 to 7.5 million dollar guy. Washington Capitals, we're in the home stretch. We got 2 more to go. Washington Capitals have Dylan Strome locked up the next 4 seasons at $5 million. This is a guy that had 65 points in his first year in Washington, then 67 this year. Solid defensively. Not a true number 1 center, more so probably a second line center on actual contenders, but still a very good player that's worth probably $7.5 million roughly. They got him at 4 and he's only 27 years, or they got him at 5 and he's only 27 years old. Worst, Tom Wilson, 7 years, $6.5 million. He's my fourth worst contract in the NHL. I understand he's a good leader. He's tough, and I think that does matter. But when you look at a guy that's in his 30s that has 7 years left at $6.5 million, that had 35 points in 74 games last year, that is objectively a shit contract. And then lastly, my Ottawa Senators. Tim Stützle, 7 years, $8.35 million. I think we can agree that he's going to bounce back from this season. And even this season, he was a point per game and he's 22 years old. Even if he's just a point per game on this entire deal, he's probably worth it at only $8.35 million. And then in terms of the worst one, at this point, it's got to be Josh Norris now that they got off Korpisalo. 6 years left, $7.95 million. And when you look at him the last 2 seasons, he's only been able to play 58 games because of his shoulder injury. And in those games, 33 points, not that encouraging of underlying numbers. When he signed this deal coming off a 35-goal season, 55 points in 65 games, we thought he was going to be a stud second-line center behind Tim Stützle. And at this point, his contract's kind of looking like a total liability. But let me know in the comments. I think I went way over with this video. I'm not going to lie. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about this? Which ones would you switch? I'll be seeing the next one.